A lot of people think that spiritual awakening is all bliss and positivity. It's not. But that's not a misconception I want to address today. There's another one I keep seeing. Recently, I keep seeing more people feel lost, depressed, or unmotivated after breaking free from societal conditioning. They assume they have spiritually awakened, but they are not quite there yet. They are actually having an existential crisis or a dark night of the soul, which can be part of the awakening process and the journey, but it's really just a trigger, not the full picture. Let me explain what I mean. To understand the difference between an existential crisis and a spiritual awakening, I have come up with this diagram to give you more clarity. The 3D, 4D, and 5D, these are the different state of consciousness. The 3D represents the matrix, the physical world, and our ego identity. And existential crisis is when we become aware of the limitation and meaningless of life within the 3D matrix. It's when we break free from societal conditioning and systems. It can be triggered by a major life event like losing a job or a loved one. It can also be triggered by an internal struggle with finding purpose or fulfillment in the material world. Or you may have read some spiritual books from authors like Eckhart Tolle or Sadhguru, and that makes you question your belief, the reality and purpose of your existence. However, this awakening that you experience is not a full awakening. You have awakened from the 3D consciousness, but you haven't awakened to the 5D consciousness, which is where true spiritual awakening occurs. This means that you know what you don't want and who you aren't. You know that you're not all this 3D stuff, but you're still figuring out who you are and what you do want, which is all this 5D stuff. You're stuck in what I like to call the limbo stage in the 4D consciousness. You're neither here nor there. That means your spiritual awakening process isn't complete. The word spiritual awakening comprises two words, spiritual and awakening. In the 4D, you got the awakening part. You have awakened from the 3D consciousness. You have awakened from the conditioning, but you haven't got to the spiritual part. You're still very much identified with your thoughts and emotion. Because if you are truly spiritually awakened, you won't be here in this limbo. You won't feel so lost, depressed, or unmotivated, at least not for a long period of time or without awareness of your true nature. Spiritual awakening is the rise of consciousness from the third dimension to the fifth dimension. There are higher states of consciousness, 6D and beyond, which I won't get into in this video. But it's not just a shift from the 3D to the 4D. When you are spiritually awakened, when you are in the 5D consciousness, you would be more aligned with your true self. You'll be more in the now, the present. You will be more connected to your higher purpose, and you will experience a deeper oneness with the world and the people around you. These are the things you don't experience much in the 4D. The vibe and energy between these two dimensions feels totally different too. In short, when you are in the 4D, you feel worse than in the 5D. In fact, you may even feel much worse than in the 3D. It's kind of like, tuning an old TV or radio. The 3D has one frequency and the 5D has another. And in the 4D, you're just stuck in between these two channels. You know that loud, annoying sound where you're tuning in between the channels? That's what it feels like when you're in the 4D. It's super uncomfortable. Or it's like eating something that gives you indigestion. It's not going down, it's not coming back up. You want to puke, but not really. You can't go back to the 3D consciousness because of what you have known now. But you also are not in the 5D consciousness yet. And that's why you're kind of stuck in this really uncomfortable place. The 5D, on the other hand, feels more peaceful, more joyful, and full of love. It's stable. Just like how the 3D is stable. Even if you may not be happy here, at least in the 3D, you got certain belief and a way of looking at the world. There are goals and desires you can work towards, you can strive for. But in the 4D, you're just kind of floating around, like lost, with no real sense of self or purpose. And it's a tough phase to be in. I know it because I've been there before. Here's another thing I want to clear up. Spiritual awakening isn't just a mental concept. It's not like a spiritual teacher can explain it to you. You understand it and boom, now you are spiritually awakened. It doesn't work that way. Let me give you an example. Have you heard of a fruit called durian? It's pretty common here in Southeast Asia, but not so much in the US or Europe. If I try to describe what durian tastes like right now, I tell you it's creamy, it's slightly bitter, slightly sweet, with a strong lingering taste and smell. You might get a sense of it, but you still wouldn't truly know what it tastes like. You have an idea of what it tastes like, but unless you actually tasted it, you won't really know. It's the same with spiritual awakening. You might understand intellectually that you're not your ego, or you are a spiritual being having a temporary physical experience. You might know that in theory that you are not your thoughts or emotion. But unless you truly felt that deep connection with the spiritual realm, that oneness with the world and nature, and experience the profound bliss and peace that comes with it, you haven't had a real spiritual awakening yet. If you haven't truly felt it, you haven't embodied those spiritual truths, then what you are experiencing might just be an existential crisis, not awakening. That's why it's so difficult to teach through words. When spiritual teacher tells you things like surrender to the process, let go of your thoughts and emotion, it might not make any sense to you, and you might start to get a little bit agitated or impatient. Like, just tell me what I need to do to get out of this crisis, this down episode. That's because you're not near the state of consciousness that can hear and resonate with those teachings. You're still very much attached to your thoughts and emotion as though they are you. And sure, an existential crisis can sometimes trigger a spiritual awakening and can get you into a 5D consciousness, but it's not always the case. Existential crisis is in the vibration of problems and questions. You ask questions such as who am I? What is my purpose? Why am I here? Sometimes this question may lead to a feeling of lost or disconnected. Other times it may help you connect with your true spiritual self and you may receive new insights about yourself and purpose. But there is no guarantee. It really depends on how open you are to listening to your intuition and how quiet your mind is. Spiritual awakening, on the other hand, is in the vibration of answer and solution. Question and answer are two separate vibrations. I used to be a math tutor. When my student ask questions like how to solve this problem, what method do I use, they are in the vibration of not knowing. No matter how many times they ask the same question, they were not going to get the answer because they are closer to the vibration of the problem than the vibration of the solutions. If I don't step in to point them in a certain direction, they wouldn't get the answer. When you are in the 4D, you are in the vibration of not knowing. You can ask a ton of questions like, what's the point of living? Or why bother? Your mind can search for meaning and answer, but you will only end up in an existential dread because the mind can't fully grasp what the spirit knows. You're just going down the rabbit hole. Your mind asks like, what's the point of working if you're all going to die one day? Your spirit says, why go on a holiday if you know that you're coming back home eventually? Why not just stay at home all day and do nothing? Why take a shower if you know that you'll get dirty later? The spirit always sees the bigger picture, but your mind doesn't. And our mind asks questions sometimes just to prove a point, just to prove that life on earth is meaningless. It's not really asking to get an answer. Existential question only satisfies the mind and affirms the ego's new belief that life is not worth living for. It doesn't satisfy the spirit at all. The spirit already has the answer and know these questions are redundant, so there's no need to ask them. I'm not saying that asking questions like who am I is not helpful. It can still help you to uncover blind spot and help you connect with your true self, but it doesn't always provide answers. When you are too close to the vibration of question, you sometimes cannot hear the answer properly. You have to connect with your spiritual self to know the answer. In essence, an existential crisis represents the question, while spiritual awakening embodies the answer. One identifies with the mind, which is just another form of the ego, while the other identifies with the spirit. Though question and answers are connected, they are fundamentally different. When you are in the 4D, you are still mostly operating from your mental consciousness. Even if you understand in theory that you're not your thoughts or emotion, but the way you act, your vibration, and the choices you make are still very heavily influenced by your thoughts and emotions. Spiritual awakening is also not just a fleeting emotional state or momentary experience. Drugs and psychedelics, for example, might give you a temporary sense of bliss, joy, or love that feels similar to a spiritual awakening. But once the high fades, you lose that deep connection. There's no lasting knowledge or embodiment. And that's not what spiritual awakening is about. Spiritual awakening is deep knowing. It's like you know what durian tastes like because you have eaten it before. Even if you're not eating durian right now, you still know the taste because it's part of you. It's already part of your memory. You don't need to eat the fruit every time to know what it's like. That's the difference between a temporary moment of bliss and a deep grounding knowing. You know those deep spiritual truths. You resonate with them deeply because you have experienced them before in your past life. You have been to the spiritual home or realm before. That's why there is so much resonance. Spiritual awakenings only trigger those lost memory you once had. Once you start to remember, it's hard to go back to the old 3D or 4D way of thinking. Of course, we don't stay in the 5D or that awakened state all the time. Living in a physical body, interacting with others, and dealing with life's triggers can pull us back to lower dimension. The energy on earth feels much heavier and more dense in the spiritual world. But when you are spiritually awakened, even when we forget our true nature, it's only temporary. And we tend to wake up again pretty quickly. Sometimes we just need a reminder or some pointers. One common mistake I see people make in the 4D is that they keep pushing against the 3D. They might judge others who are still in the 3D or blame the system and society for their struggles. They might complain about the 9 to 5 system, the medical system, the justice system. But what they fail to realize is that this resistance only keep them stuck in the 4D and stop them from moving into higher realms of consciousness. When you move to higher consciousness, you don't blame others for your reality. You create your own reality. The more you focus on the 3D and their system, the more you're actually leaning towards the 3D. You're not leaning towards the 5D. Here's the key. Listen to this carefully. Shifting to a new dimension isn't about rejecting where you have been. When you shift your consciousness from 3D to 4D to 5D, you don't reject or deny the levels you were at before. A spiritual awakening doesn't erase your previous experience, it only adds to them. You're opening yourself up to new perspectives and new realities, but you're not throwing away old realities. It's not like you can ignore the physical law. It's not like once you know you are a spiritual being and suddenly you are flying and then the law of gravity doesn't apply to you. It doesn't work like this. These dimensions are not mutually exclusive. You are a multi-dimensional being, and when you raise your consciousness, you're building on top of what you have knew before. Being in the 5D doesn't mean you can't interact with the people in the 3D or 4D. You still can. You still have thoughts and emotion. You don't lose your ability to think or conceptualize something. You just don't believe everything that your mind tells you or spend too much in your head. And you still can work in the 9 to 5 system if your soul calls you to it. But you won't want to spend too much time in this other dimension because now you're seeing things from a higher and wider perspective. You know that the so-called problems people from this lower dimension are telling you aren't really problems if they can understand and see what you see at a higher dimension. And when you become more creative, you can also come up with different ways of earning a living without being like stuck in the 9 to 5 system. You have options now because once you're connected to the higher dimension, you become more creative. You don't limit yourself to a 9 to 5 work. But if you are in the 4D, denying or dismissing the 3D reality, like why do I have to work or why do I have to earn money, or judging people creating the system for making you miserable, then you're making things harder for yourself. And that will keep you stuck in the 4D for a very long time. If you feel like spiritual awakening or existential crisis has ruined your life, watch this next video. I'll explain why and how to get out of it.